Opening credits. Shared by two men. A Big Beautiful Woman Ménage, historical romantic short story. By Summer Cooper. Auto-narrated using Google technology. Chapter 1. Everyone, great job tonight, screamed the director, after Anne's second show of the week. Another show, another few dollars, she thought, changing out of her overly tight corset and overly appointed dress. Everything she wore was overdone and overly tight. Anne was the closing act at one of Drury Lane's most famous theaters. The saying, "It's not over until the fat lady sings," could describe Anne to a T, of course. When she started, she just thought she was just slightly more robust than other women, extra bosom here, some more curves there. Soon it became apparent to her that she was fat just like they said, and that no one would ever actually want her. Having finished getting changed into a more modest walking gown, Anne walked out of the dressing room, taking a deep breath before making her way through the throng of well-wishers. Most were there for the stunning Miss White or the vivacious Miss Ravenswood, neither of which were their real names but their stage names. But every once in a while someone would come out of the woodwork for Ms. Anne Van Ray. She used her first name but not her last. Unfortunately, Anne had learned early on, after only 2 romps with potential suitors, that a romp was all they ever wanted. They did not want to shower her with jewelry or make her their kept mistress, something she would be more willing to be. All they wanted was a moment to say they slept with that famous rotund singer. When they shoved her out of the hotel room bed early the next morning, she realized she was good for nothing more than less than half an hour of their time, and she cut all well-wishers off past the cordial greeting at the door. It's not as if she got anything out of the experience. Just some sweaty guy on top of her from behind, and a moment of fake pleasure. She had never felt the wild feeling described to her by the other singers, who slept in many a bed without a care in the world, and showered with whatever their heart
censored.
She truly did not believe that feeling existed, or that at least there was not a man who wanted her who could get the job done. After saying goodbye to the greeters at the stage room door, Anne walked away with a sway to her step she did not feel, waiting until she was halfway home before dropping the facade. Drooping her shoulders, she walked to her lonely bed with no company of any kind. Not even a lady's maid to lift her spirits upon arrival, because she could not afford one. Chapter 2. She spent the next morning, wasting the hours until it was time to be back at the theater again. She cooked something she could warm up that night, cleaned her tiny one-room apartment as best she could with what little she had, and made a trip to the store to buy new silk stockings, her favorite French ones that caressed her leg like the lightest of arousing touches. One of the few luxuries she gave herself. It wasn't as if anyone actually touched her leg to feel their silken softness. At 3, Anne made her way back to the theater, only a few minutes' walk for her but much more comfortable in the daylight. At night there were bars, and drunken men who would do anything they pleased to a woman of ill repute such as herself. Unfortunately, stage performers weren't seen as more than prettier prostitutes. Upon making it to the door of the theater, she knocked 3 times, let in by the intimidating but lovable brute of the show, Theodore. Despite his wicked ways on the stage, where he was forced to play one villain after another, Teddy was, just as his name suggested, a total teddy bear and Anne's favorite person here. They were like kindred spirits, her always being the mother or villainous type and him always being the brute. Too bad their friendship never went beyond backstage and into the home. Teddy was muscled, and would have been a more likely candidate for her
censored
happiness than the fools that she met at the stage door each night. She noticed Baron Edgecroft out of the corner of her eye, and cut down the hall to avoid him. She was never impressed or excited by his overly loud outfits, or the fact that he walked with a mahogany cane. The man was thinner than a rail, and she was sure he had tried opium on more than one occasion. Possibly regularly. Either way, she was sure he was only there for a quick romp, nothing that would satisfy her. Anne ducked into her dressing room and began to prepare herself for the evening, losing herself in her pre-show rituals and the excitement of the night ahead. The show they were doing was one of her favorites, if only for the lovely aria she was able to close with. It was her favorite to sing using a wide range of vocals, made it both fun and challenging. After the show, Anne prepared herself for the usual throng, but upon exiting the theater she found not her usual following but two men. The men were devastatingly handsome and similar in look, as if they were brothers save for their eye color. Each had dark chocolate hair, a cream au lait complexion, and muscles subtly hidden under layers of clothing. Her 5-foot stature, dwarfed by these giant men, made her feel small for the first time in her life. "Hello, mademoiselle, my name is Jake Rollingsford, Duke of Kelfield, and this is my friend Lord Ralph Ashford. May we take just a few moments of your time?" Instantly on the defense after so much time being the butt of others' jokes, Anne bristled. "May I ask what this is about?" "A proposition," the younger Lord Ralph chimed in. "And what kind of proposition would be acceptable among us?" "That is precisely the wrong question to ask, my lady," Lord Ralph rebutted. So this was to be an improper proposal, that just would not do. Without so much as a "by your leave," Anne gave them a curt nod, moving past them, heading home to her lonely one-room apartment. Truthfully, she would trade this hovel for somewhere else if she could be a mistress, but she didn't see that happening anytime soon. Chapter 3. The next day, Anne arrived at the theater to find several dozen wildflowers and a calling card for the Duke of Kelfield. The men had sent her flowers. Something she had never gotten before. She softened at the thought that these men might be more sincere than the others, even though they had not approached her before, but immediately pushed the thought away. Why would two friends pursue her at once with real intentions? They would not, of course. She would just thank them for the flowers, telling them she was not interested in these games. Hopefully they would show up tonight, so she could get this over with. Show up they did, with more flowers than Anne had ever seen before. "Just a moment of your time, and if you are not interested in what we have to offer, we will part ways, and you will never have to see us again, on my honor as a gentleman." She found it hard to believe that they would truly leave her alone, but she was intrigued enough at this point to listen. She might even get something out of it. On that thought she said boldly, "You may take me to dinner and speak with me there. Then I will make a decision." She was wearing the wrong clothes for a dinner, dressed as she was in a sapphire blue walking gown, but Anne knew they wouldn't dare take her anywhere they might run into polite society, so she doubted her inappropriate dress would even be noted. So much time had passed since she last dined out, and even though they had settled in a small off-street cafe, Anne felt as if she were royalty as the Duke pulled a chair out for her to sit in. The serving woman brought out the first course of nettle soup when they sat. They ate in silence at first, but then one of them spoke. "So we are asking you to be with both of us," Ralph stated bluntly. Anne's brow furrowed as she thought about this. Were they serious? Why were they asking her, of all people? This must be some kind of farce, she thought as she finished her soup. Standing, she placed her napkin beside her now empty bowl, and looked at them. "I may not be as beautiful as the women who you usually partake in, but I am beautiful in my own right, and do not deserve to be mocked by you. Good night, Your Grace." "Lord Ashford." "Miss Van Ray, relax, we are not picking on you. How could you even think that we would not believe you were beautiful?" She was not the usual fare for mistresses. Sure, she could sing and she saw a certain beauty in her body, but she never expected one, never mind two men, to be interested in her for her body. It had to be a ruse. "Because I am not a mistress, I am a villainess in the opera. I am beautiful but not slender, and not some debutante or widow." "That is precisely why we are interested," Ralph said. This surprised her. Based on the normal fare around town, Anne would have guessed that they preferred bones to curves, and while that was their prerogative, it did give Anne a painful feeling in her gut to be completely out of their league. But if they were really not interested in that type, which Anne found unlikely, then she was willing to listen. She sat back down as the server brought the next course of quail in sauce to the table. "It is true that we want you to be our mistress, but Ralph and I share everything, horses and clubs included. Truthfully, we are best friends and we do everything together. Ralph is a second son, but that shouldn't keep him out of the first state of fashion. Besides that, we just want to see if we find it more pleasurable to take two women together." So you haven't done this before? She asked, shocked. Had mistresses, yes, but shared mistresses? No. But we think it will work out, Ralph said with a broad smile. Anne did not know how to respond to that. They wanted her together? How was that even possible? The thought made her stomach cramp with nerves, while her core began to wet at the idea of it all. She had never felt this way before, aroused as she was. Her well-wishers and so-called admirers had never sparked such feelings in her. The exhilarating shiver that ran through her forced her to focus back on dinner. She ate in silence for a few moments before looking up at the pair. So would you like some port with the syllabub? Ralph asked, throwing her off for a moment. Why yes, of course, thank you, she said as the server cleared the last course from the table. 3 ports with the lemon syllabub, miss, Jake declared, leaning back in his chair. So if I do this, would I continue to live alone at my apartment? No, you would live in our mistress' house, but there is no hurry on that. So I could go with you now to try this out. What if I do not like being with 2 men? Have you ever been in a ménage à trois situation before? I have barely been in a ménage à deux situation, Anne joked, as the server sat her dessert and port in front of her. If you were unhappy after a trial period, we could simply part ways, but we will have a contract after that. You would still have the ability to part ways with us, but it will be more complicated after that. Is that agreeable to you? Jake asked, sipping his port. That works for me, thank you, and please call me Anne, she remarked, taking a bite of the creamy substance before setting the spoon to the side. She was too filled with anticipation to continue eating. As if sensing her arousal, Ralph asked, Should we get started then, Anne? At their nods he rose from the table without even sampling his dessert and walked out. A moment later, after Jake paid, the 2 of them followed. Climbing into their carriage, they drove off into the night, ready to see where this connection might lead. Chapter 4.
This scene has been censored to provide a safe and enjoyable reading experience for everyone.
Chapter 5. A week later, she arrived at the theater to be greeted by yellow tulips, along with the wild roses in pink and red she got from Ralph and Jake each night before her show. She was not sure whom the yellow tulips were from, since she had never gotten flowers from an admirer other than Jake and Ralph. They smelled wonderful, if not as intoxicating as her beloved roses, which she immediately stuck in a vase until after the show. Jake was trying to get Anne to move into a house instead of staying in her apartment, which was too small for visitors, but so far Anne had refused. She felt too indebted to them already with all the fine gowns and the accessories to go with them, both necessary and completely unnecessary, such as the 32-carat diamond pendant necklace she received from Jake the previous night. They were trying so hard to woo her that she was not sure if she was comfortable with the whole mistress thing. She loved the finer things in life, but Anne was used to living alone. Her parents passed away when she was 16 and immediately taking to the stage to feed herself. She was 23 now. She loved the devotion and pleasure they gave, but was not sure of the showering of gifts that came with it. She loved being part of something. Turning back to the yellow tulips, she wondered once again whom they were from. Little did she know she was about to find out. Tonight's show was fun. She was able to play a wicked villainess who sang a lament at the end before she dies. Laments were soulful. They were the best thing to sing when feeling down, not that she was feeling down exactly. Just contemplative. Anne was curious about the tulips, among other things. Like whether she should move like her handsome and sexy men wanted. She was sure they would get their way eventually, but she was not sure how long she should draw this whole thing out. She did not want to seem eager for them to spend money on her, for in truth she was not. She wanted the soul-deep connect of their little tête-à-tête. If only they could be like a family, taking care of each other instead of only a relentless pursuit of pleasure. However, that was not meant to be, Anne thought, as she gathered up her hair into hairpins to head home. Today she was not seeing either Jake or Ralph because they had plans, so she was headed to her lonely house, which she had not seen in days. Standing from her vanity, she donned her navy pelisse and left out the stage door. Not expecting to see anyone. She had not had any admirers since she started seeing her men, which was a relief since they were not worth her time. Tonight, however, she was surprised to see Baron Edgecroft waiting at the door, a solitary yellow tulip in hand. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was loneliness after so many nights of devoted attention, but she approached the Baron and said hello. "How are you this evening, Baron?" she asked, plastering on a smile. "Better now that I have spoken to you," he said, holding forth the yellow tulip for her to take. She added it to her bouquet, the 3 colors of yellow, pink, and red, not exactly contrasting but looking strange to her just the same. Wishing to leave at once, a small feeling of dread appearing in her stomach, Anne stepped back from the Baron, but he only followed. "Would you like an escort home, Miss Van Ray? Or should I call you Anne?" "Miss Van Ray's fine," she said with a wan smile. "And I would enjoy the company, thank you," she said, despite the growing dread. They left together, Anne leading slightly as they turned toward her home. It was only a quarter-hour's walk, but it felt much longer. The walk was quiet while neither of them spoke. This was obviously because they had nothing in common. When they drew up in front of her apartment, she began to turn toward the Baron in order to bid him good night, when he was suddenly upon her. A smooth, clearly hardly worked hand muffled her terrified scream. She immediately began fighting, blindly thrashing against the iron grip that held her as she was swept into a small side alley. "Shut up," the Baron said as he joked her, and then shoved her hard against the wall. He never seemed like an overly large man, wearing overly bright clothing and walking with his mahogany cane. Anne heard it fall to the ground. Now he was everywhere, overwhelming her with his presence seeming giant-like in stature. She barely caught herself in time from sprawling head first into the wall she had been shoved toward. She looked up in wide-eyed terror to see Edgecroft's glassy eyes. Clearly he was not in his right mind. A sickening knowing promptly spiraled down the pit of her stomach, paralyzing her. She knew what was coming. This walk had been a ruse. "You want this," Edgecroft slurred as he pressed her up against the alley wall harshly. Struggling for calm, Anne swallowed hard. She was shaking uncontrollably. Her
censored
heaved with fear. She tried to back away, sliding along the brick wall. He stopped her, bracing his manicured hand on the wall to block her path. With his other hand, he stroked her hair. He smiled. She sobbed out loud. "You are sharing yourself with 2 friends on a nightly basis. It would seem only fair that you would share yourself with me as well. Everything will be just fine, as long as you give me what I came for." "No," she uttered. "Whore, like you have a choice." "What kind of slut gives herself to 2 men at once?" he cried out hoarsely, lowering his stinking mouth and trying to
censored
her. Wrenching her face away from him, she shrieked, but he stifled the sound by slapping his hand once again over her mouth. She fought against his surprising strength, her mind refusing to accept that this was happening. That she was really being attacked in the worst way imaginable. Then his hand curled around her throat, and he ground himself against her, his breath growing raspy in her ear. She grimaced in terror, and her stomach churned with nausea as tears welled in her eyes. "Nice and easy now, be still," he growled in a gravelly voice. "You know you want this. You practically asked for it." He pinned her hands above her head.
This scene has been censored to provide a safe and enjoyable reading experience for everyone.
"You tell anyone and I'll take it out on you worse than this," he shouted, grabbing hold of her again and lifting his cane from the ground. He brought the cane down repeatedly, causing blood to cover her face and body. Suddenly he released her, walking away into the darkness without a care in the world. As if he had not just ripped her apart from the inside out. Blind with crying and the blood that trickled down her face, clothes torn, hair disheveled, she ran to her apartment using the street lamps to guide her. She ran up to her room, shut, and locked the door behind her, sagging against it. What was she to do? Where was she to turn? All she knew was that she could not stay here, so close to where she was attacked. She grabbed a bag and packed 2 outfits and a nightgown, before walking out the door. She just needed a few days. A few days to heal and figure out what she was going to do next. Chapter 6. She wandered the streets, blind with crying on the crowded street. She was not sure which square she had landed in, only that she was not sure where to go. She must have been mistaken in her wild, incoherent state for a drunken streetwalker, because the next thing she knew she was in a bed. Apparently, an officer had escorted her to the Magdalene house. She barely remembered the women there who helped her. She only remembered spending 3 days sitting on a cot against a barren wall with her knees drawn up, and thinking repeatedly that she had no idea how to approach the Duke of Kelfield and Lord Ashford. She was truly a whore. That was all she was good for now. Life as she had known it was over. She did not even want to sing anymore. Every time she tried, she was hit with this overwhelming feeling of exposure. It was her life on the stage that did this to her, the stage which made her well known enough for this to happen. If she hadn't been on stage, neither Baron Edgecroft, His Grace, or Ralph would have noticed her. She would have been lonely, yes, but she would not have been hurt. Of course she missed His Grace and Ralph terribly. The sad fact was she wanted them back. She just hoped they still wanted her. She would just wait a few days before she saw them, just until the small gashes in her face and arms to heal. If only her heart could heal that quickly. Those few days turned into a week before the gashes on her face and arms turned into bruises, and Anne was able to leave the shelter. Still not wanting to return to her apartment and having nowhere else to turn, Anne turned to her men, afraid of how they would react to her recent attack. Would they turn her away? She was no longer beautiful, probably permanently scarred from the attack, and unsure if she could ever have
censored
again. Could she handle having even one man, let alone two, take her in the fashion she had grown accustomed? Upon arriving at the Duke of Kelfield's and Lord Ashford's home, she stopped to take in the sheer size of it. The place was huge. How did she ever fit in here? With its opulent edging and doorman, she was not sure how she was ever allowed in, let alone how she could possibly get in now to talk to Jake and Ralph. Taking a breath, she walked up the steps and knocked on the door, their stodgy butler answering. "Sorry, we do not help vagrants here," the man snarled out, preparing to shut the door in her face. "Wait, if you could please just tell His Grace that Anne is here. I do not mind waiting outside," she near shouted up at the tall man. He must be at least 6.5 feet. The man nodded slowly, then shut the door. Anne stepped back and continued to look at the place. From inside she could hear the loud booming of Ralph. "Really, you should fire the man for even thinking about leaving the beautiful, incomparable Anne outside like this. Does he have no decorum?" "He must have had his reasoning, Ralph. Let's see why before we pass judgment. She has been gone for over a week. Who knows what condition she is in now," said the ever-patient Jake as his voice grew the closer he got to the door. Just then the door flew open, and Ralph and Jake were there ready to take the world by storm if need be. Anne scrambled to make it back to the top step, but their simultaneous gasp stopped her, forced her to look up. "What happened to you, my poor dear?" Jake started just as Ralph shouted. "Tell me who did this. I will treat them in the same poor manner they treated you." "It's unimportant who did this, just that it's done," Anne came out saying, her voice sounding more confident than she felt. "I need a place to stay, but I understand if you do not want a non-mistress staying in your mistress house. That house should be reserved for whoever takes my place for you. Do not be ridiculous." "Of course you cannot stay in the mistress house," Jake nearly snapped. "Oh, I understand. Sorry for taking up your time." "Wait right there, Anne. This is not a conversation for the front steps of our house," Jake said, grabbing her arm and dragging her with him into the entryway followed by the parlor. "We were just talking about taking a trip to our home in Cumberland," Ralph said. "You will have to come with us, at least until you are healed up," Jake finished. "What kind of mistress would I be, if I'm just there to heal and not sleep with you?" Anne said while wondering if it was even possible for them to help her, without the pursuit of pleasure getting in the way. "We can take care of women without sleeping with them," Jake said with a pout. "Remember, Ralph has a sister. We have taken care of someone else before ourselves. I do not wish to be indebted to you." "Of course not. We wanted to give you a house for weeks now. Why would it be any worse to live with us somewhere else?" Ralph said, "I will send word ahead for the house staff and we'll head out tomorrow. In the meantime, let us head to your place and get your beautiful things." Anne really didn't want to do that, but she could not leave her things behind. Hopefully nothing had been stolen. There was no real war, no cannons, and no bullets. The armies that fought were within her, fighting as though they would tear her soul apart, but she could not run. Jake and Ralph had bought those beautiful things for her, and she was going to get them, no cowering in the shadows of her powerful protectors. Of course the Baron was not even there to worry about, but she could still feel the pain of her attack, the feeling of being torn apart from the inside. It may only be a small victory, but she would know she had done it, and that would be enough. They went into the apartment, the huge men barely fitting into the small space. They packed up her belongings and left the building, hopefully for the last time when she saw him. He was wearing a magenta suit and carrying that mahogany cane, causing her breath to falter. "I will not run. I will not run. I will not run," she repeated the mantra in her head over and over with each step, though the sight of the mahogany cane made her want to hide, working like a force to hold her back by her consciousness like a solid wall. She refused to cower but passed, looking the monster in the eye to let him see she would no longer fear him. He might never understand the meaning, but she would know she had done it, and that would be enough. It was his voice screaming in her nightmares, she thought, as he let out a laugh with his friends. She was afraid, so afraid, and shaking, icy with fear down to her fingertips. She came with an ally, her hand on Jake's arm. "Anne? It's all right, let's just go home," she heard herself say, as if from a distance, over the rushing of her blood in her ears. God bless Jake, he did not understand, but he went with her anyway, loading her into the carriage. The two of them climbed in behind her, and they took off down the street. They arrived back at their opulent townhouse, and Anne was immediately exhausted upon seeing it. She was not interested in eating or anything, she just wanted to sleep. Luckily it was almost 10, early for city hours but not ridiculous when one is tired. "Could we just go to bed?" she asked, immediately feeling foolish for assuming they did not already have plans for the evening. "Of course, I have a suite prepared for you if you would like to change and go to sleep. It has been a long week for us as well," Jake confided, making Anne feel instantly guilty for putting them out and disappearing on them. She went up to her suite and changed before coming back into the hallway to say her goodnights. She was surprised to see them standing and waiting for her. "Well, good night," she said as she approached them down the hall. Both of their eyes darkened in arousal, causing Anne to stop and clench her thighs at the sudden renewal of those carnal feelings. "Good night," Ralph said, standing there looking at her with
censored
in his entire body. "Do you need anything, my dear?" Jake said, moving towards her. "No, I'm fine," she said, turning to head back to her room. Chapter 7. Suddenly Anne stopped in the hallway, not wanting to be alone. "Can we sleep in the same bed? Would that be okay, or would you only want to?" She hung her head as she thought about her question. Of course they would only want to sleep with her in their relentless pursuit of pleasure. What other reason was there to stay in the same bed? "Of course you can stay with us, my dear. I would not want to sleep alone after such an ordeal either," Jake said, moving toward her with all the sinewy grace of a mountain cat. "Yes, we would not leave you alone, sweetheart. We can all sleep in Jake's room," Ralph suggested, ushering them both down the hall.
This scene has been censored to provide a safe and enjoyable reading experience for everyone.
Thank you for reading my book. If you like this story, I think you'll enjoy my book. Get your copy of Kidnapped by Two Men now. Please leave a review if you like this book. That's the best thing you can do to help authors like me, so others can find my books. It can be as long or as short as you'd like. Even a star rating is amazing and appreciated. Thanks in advance. About Summer Cooper. Thank you so much for reading. Without you, it wouldn't be possible for me to be a full-time author. I hope you enjoy reading my books as much as I do writing them. Besides, obviously, reading and writing, I also love cuddling my dogs, shouting at Alexa, being upside down, aka yoga, and driving my family cray-cray. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Goodreads, BookBub. Get in touch at hello@summercooper.com. www.summercooper.com. Closing credits. This has been shared by two men. Written by Summer Cooper. Auto-narrated using Google technology. Copyright 2024 by Lovie Books Limited. Production copyright 2024 by Lovie Books Limited.